longest, like I always say, this is the longest relationship I've ever had.
Yeah.
Right. And it probably will be in my whole life. Like
Right.
if I continue this for a long time, it will be longer than my marriage, you know? Like that's crazy. But like the podcast has pushed me in so many ways, like, and triggered me in so many ways. And in many, like, I've had to do a lot of healing in my relationship with this thing. Like, you know, in 10 years, you bump up against stuff, right? Like, it's just like a romantic relationship. It's like, if you don't keep it spicy, things get stale. Like, you want to walk away. Like, you know, you have to put, it's about my relationship with the actual thing.
Amazing.
You know? And again, when people have this idea, everything I do is fun.
Right.
And like a lot of what I do is fun. It's so fun to just sit here and have these conversations with people that I love. Yeah. And like this, and like the fact that this is like work is amazing. And at the same time, there's so much else that goes into this whole dynamic that pushes me and challenges me in a lot of ways. And like just the longevity of that relationship and the personalities that you deal with and what it calls up within me and certain conversations that, you know, where things unravel, and just the commitment alone of it, of showing up, you know, at least once a week. For a long time it was 2 times a week. Yeah. The vulnerability, the things that people say, like there's so many other dynamics that really push you. And there's so many times I was like, it's always been a conversation of like, do we end this? Like that has always been on the table, you know? And there's been a lot of times I really thought about it, and I've had to look at, am I just attached to it because it's been so long? I don't want to shut it down. Is this just I need to change my relationship with it? Like, again, for me, it really feels, it's like a romantic relationship where I'm like, do we break up or do we just need to like work on this? Like, you know, it's been so really helpful for me. And I really do feel like I've learned a lot about like long-term relationships through my podcast.
It makes total sense. Okay, we're gonna double tap on this long-term relationship, because like we're celebrating, and I feel so honored to be here for the 700th episode.
I know, it's crazy.
It's insane. Talk to God a lot more these days.
I love that.
Yeah. Do you talk to God often?
Literally all the time, 24/7. It's so ingrained in me that I don't realize it's happening.
When did that start? Was that like, did you always, as long as you can remember, were you always talking to God, or?
When I was younger, yes.
Yeah.
And then for a while I wasn't, but I still was. So I said I went through a period where I said I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in any of that.
In the universe? Were you still like, oh, I don't believe in God, but I believe in this universe?
I didn't believe I didn't believe in anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I believed. So, and I was dating an atheist. Yeah. So I decided maybe I just don't know anything. Yeah. But during that time, I think when I look back on my internal dialogue, I always was still talking to something. I didn't know what it was. So yeah, I think it's just so ingrained in me. Yeah. And I realize this too with what I teach. Sometimes it's hard for me to break down what I'm doing or how I'm doing it, because I don't think of it like that. Right. People ask me for steps of things or what I'm doing, and I'm like, I don't know, I just live, because it's so ingrained in who I am that I don't break it down like that. So I kind of forget. And
that's like that's well, I feel like that's why you're also really great teachers, because you do break things down really well, like in your courses.
Thank you.
And
I try.
Yeah, it's a process for sure, but it's like this process of taking this, what's become unconscious competence, like competence that we have, ways of doing things, systems that we've built and we've learned just naturally, and if you can take those and then break them down and teach other people, it's like those are the best teachers, if you can like find the systems or the ways that this works. And then I feel like that always, whenever I do that, it always helps reinforce that within myself as well. But like that's a point. And I've gone through some of your stuff online too, and I see the way that you talk in workshops or in speeches, and I feel like you do a good job of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it helps me for sure to go back and try and break it down, but I think I need to go through it and just live the experience first. Yep. And then it takes time for me to break it down. That's the difference. Is I don't just, sometimes people ask me a question, I'm like, I'm not sure. I got to sit with that. Right. And I really have to break down how I got from here to there, how I channel, how I open up my gifts. I've got to like really sit with that. Yeah. And I think a lot of people give out these instruction manuals without actually having lived it or embodied it. Yep. So it's not really complete. And I think that if it's this easy for you to give out a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's probably not legit. And so I think mine are a bit more complicated because I like live out the journey, but I think that's how most people actually get to where they want to go anyway. Like, you're living it out. It unfolds for you. You know, it was an organic thing for me versus most of what I teach. It wasn't like I was trying. I was trying to learn that result. It was just, I fell into this, I lived this, and then I look back and I tell you what I learned, what I figured out.
Super good.
Yeah.
That's authenticity.
Yeah.
You've learned it, you've lived it, and then it makes teaching it that much more. I love this, like, there's kind of this diagram of student teacher that I love, is just like you're the student and then you become the teacher, and through teaching you learn, and we teach what we most need to learn always as well, but like through really embodying and then living it and practicing it, then you can start to, at least for me, then I start to like, oh cool, now I have the lived experience, and then it refines how you talk about it or share about it or teach it. 100%.
I had a client ask a question that I took as a really big compliment, like this was last week. And she just asked, she said, how did you learn all of this? It was in a high training. She's like, is there a book you read? Is there, like, how did you learn all this? Like, you know so much.
Right.
And she's done a lot of her own spiritual training and stuff too. And I took that question as a big compliment. And she's like, because I don't hear the things you're talking about, I've never heard anybody say before. And I said, I learned all of this. It was like, no, there wasn't a book I read. I tried going that route, but there's nothing really out there. Like in the realm of energy work, I have learned everything I know just by a shit ton of sessions and just like, getting out there and working with a lot of energy bodies, and you learn it. And so I said, I was like, you can't learn this in a book, you know? So, I mean, I want to put it in books and I want to put it in courses, and that's why Ahai is so important to me, because I just feel like there's so much that I have figured out and I have gone through experience that I feel like God delivered to me that I want. And I think I am good at breaking that down. You know, I live it out and I break it down. And so I do, that's a huge thing that's important to me in my heart, of like bringing that Ahai training to a lot more people, because there's just a lot of things I know in the realm of energy that like I've never seen anyone else talk about, you know? So, I mean, especially with how grounded I make it, like whether it's medical intuition or it's money and finances, it's business, it's relationships. I have so much experience. And that's what I told them. I said, like, there's only so much you can learn through even what I say, you know, you just got to get out there and get the reps. But for me, I just did always feel like, whether it was when I was trying to learn to further cultivate my channel, or when I was learning to work with energy, there was no book or course that was even getting accessible. It wasn't, there was accessible stuff, but it wasn't getting anywhere deeper than what it was just so surface level. It was all the same things. And I think a lot of people nowadays, everyone's just so desperate to create more content and to like make a name for themselves. That there's a lot of content out there that's just people hearing from other people things and then regurgitating it in a book or in their content, and there's nothing original, and so it's not interesting, and so you're not going anywhere deeper. And the only way you can go somewhere deeper is if you live a new life experience. That's it. You know, so you can read 100 books on opening up your psychic gifts, and they're all probably going to say really similar things, but there are layers to that nobody's really talking about, and like what that takes, especially on the personal level. So I just think that with anything in life, right, experience trumps everything else, and there's just you've got to go out and live it and get the reps in. 100%.
There's no shortcut to that. You can't take the fast pass on that. Like you have to wait in the line at Disneyland for that. Like you can't fast pass that.
And I don't know why people are so resistant to that. I do feel like as a culture there's this trend energetically, everybody wants to do it intellectually. They want to do it in their minds, right? They want to sit behind their phones and talk. They don't want to go out and be in an experience and live it. A lot of people don't want to have real life experiences. It's very, I want to say, odd. I mean, I understand why it's happening. Like that's part of kind of the agenda of what's going on. But I think that if people started prioritizing experience, like living it, getting in new situations, meeting new people, traveling new places, just go out and live, that's where you're going to learn all of the things that the universe, God, is trying to deliver to you. Like that's where you get that gold information. And people are sitting here trying to be inspired by listening to other people. And then it's just this game of everyone's podcasting about the same shit. Everybody is writing books about the same shit because no one has an original idea, because they're not having original experiences. And so you have to go have an original experience, and you can't force that. You can't even really plan that. You have to go let it be synchronistic and let life deliver it to you.
Amen. So. I love that. Well said. Yeah. There's this phrase that I learned in the personal development space called mental masturbation, which is just like sitting there, just like just listening to the same stuff on loop, or just not getting out there and rubbing shoulders and growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. Those new experiences don't happen in a
Mm-hmm.
vacuum. New perspectives don't just come to you without putting yourself in a new environment or changing something about your environment. I think there's a shift happening back towards people wanting to get more in person again, which is good. Do you feel that too? Like, there's
I do think a lot of people are wanting to get back in person, but I think there's also a lot of resistance with that. I think coming from different angles. I think people are lazier. I think people have found more excuses of why it's never a good time.
Mm-hmm.
They're used to the convenience, right? And then people are like the money.
Yep.
People have gotten used to doing it the other way, so there is more resistance for sure. So that comes into play.
It's so funny because just literally yesterday I was working through some of that resistance and booking this trip that I'm taking in January to Colombia, which I've never been, and I'm gonna go with a friend, and we're gonna do a little exploration and post up, a little work, a little mastermind, and as I'm going down logically and I'm like looking at the flights, I'm looking at the prices, I'm looking at the logistics, I'm just like, oh, this seems like so much effort. I just want to stay in San Diego. Like, let me just stay because I want to be in my routine. And then I've done this enough to where I'm like, I felt my intuition is just like, no, there's something here for you. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to trust that. I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to book the trip. And I booked the trip. And instantly there's some relief of like, okay, cool. Like, now I'm going and now there's a new experience on the horizon for me. But you said something great there, which is this resistance that we feel around it. And how do you work with that inner resistance voice, and like how do you discern when that resistance is your intuition telling you maybe not book the trip versus it's just resistance in the way of you actually booking the trip? Does that make sense?
No, that's a good question, and I'm going to answer it kind of backwards because something I wanted to say before was it's been interesting for me as a facilitator. Part of everything I do in my business is intentional. Like, it is very intentional. And part of why I always make changes to basically force people to get out of their fucking comfort zone. And so there's been a lot of changes I've made, even in the last year, but like consistently throughout my career, that people give me a lot of pushback toward. And it's because I'm like, you guys are getting way too comfortable listening to things that make you feel good and you're not taking any action. You're not actually making any changes. So then what I'll do is I'll go change the container. Like everything that happened with, like, when I was channeling all the Oracle stuff, like that was a season and then it ended and people just wanted more of it. I'm like, but the number of you that are listening to this, and there's so much to work with here. There's so much to work with. And you're just coming back week after week and you're not making any changes. Like, that's not going to work. Right. So that's the other thing to balance, like, as a facilitator. And I think about that with everything, whether it's, you know, writing books or like creating masterminds or running programs. I'm always looking at where are people just joining this because it's comfortable for them to learn it in this style, and then what's going to force them to get out of that. Even with things like retreats, right? The number of people that are extremely uncomfortable going to a retreat where they don't know what's happening. Like, that's the fucking point. That's the point. Like, that's where the best shit happens, you know? And most people, they think they know what they need and they don't. And that's why you're still struggling. Right. It's just that simple. So I just think it's a really funny thing how people, they want to change. And then there are people that have created the result they're trying to get who are giving them advice and they want to argue with it. Yeah. I'm like, you're not going to get anything different by continuing to stay in your comfort zone. Yeah. Right. So going back to, like, you know, how do I discern my inner resistance if it's actual, like, this isn't correct for me versus an expansion point? Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question.
There's a deeper feeling in my body that is excited and kind of like hungry and knows there's something important there that might go along with the resistance. In which case, that I've got to go push past it. But if there is a deeper feeling of like and that might even be underneath some dread, honestly. But I think if my body has no physical energy, like my sacral is shutting down, honestly, and if it will have more of a neutral feeling, I actually think. If it's just a straight no, if it's just not in alignment, it there won't be an emotional charge to it. There won't be like a no. Because that is just my comfort zone saying, no, stay here. The subconscious will do all kinds of things to try and keep us in our little comfort zones. It says all kinds of cute things. But when it's really just not in alignment, I don't have an emotional charge to it. Like, if I was forced to go, sure, I'd be fine, you know? But if I don't, okay, I don't think I really want to. I think that's the big thing for me. Yeah. And there's another piece there. If it's just not in alignment, yeah, I just think it will feel, I think I'm just looking for, is there something here for me? I think it's probably the best way.
It's a good frame of asking that question too.
Yeah. I explored this a lot throughout the year, and something that's coming to mind was, so I went to this thing and I was asked to give a talk, and I was like, sure, why not? I didn't know what I was going to talk on.
Was this out in Philly when you were in Philly?
Yeah. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but it got closer and we were scheduling the talk. It was like 2 weeks out, and I just got this feeling of like, absolutely not. Like I started getting dizzy. Like, it was a visceral thing when I got this email, and I felt this dread feeling, like I can't. And I was like, this is really weird. And I meditated on it, and I was like, what's going on here? And I felt these really palpable experiences intuitively and physically and with my sacral kind of all at the same time. And I was realizing, wow, this is a really juicy moment to explore, like the difference between like how do I know it's my sacral or my intuition or just my inner resistance. And so I was like, am I just like scared for some reason? And then I started breaking down, like, why would I be scared though? And I'm like, I've given a lot of talks before in front of a lot more people than this. It's only 7 minutes. Like, it's not like a big deal. It's like really comfortable community. I had no real reason to why that would, scare me. And then I was just like, what else is out of my comfort zone? And in the moment, one of my other friends was like around, and that friend was like, I think you're just scared, and like really pushing that on me, like, oh my God, is this just my inner resistance? But then I was sitting with it, and I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just, my sacral, my whole body is saying like, no, and I thought about times when I have had real resistance, and I think that it will feel like it's coming from my mind. Right. It'll be a lot of logic talk.
Makes sense.
And I didn't have any logic talk. I didn't have a reason.
Yeah.
But it was like my sacral was just contracting and like dread, and I was literally getting dizzy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think my body just doesn't want this, And so I just sent an email. I said, for whatever reason, I'm getting a really, really strong no to this, so I'm not going to do this, and I'm just going to assume someone else needs to have that space. And then I was like, I guess I'll see what's like, how it's gonna play out. And without getting too into the details, because they're, I think, personal for that person, the person who ended up taking that spot, it was like, kind of last minute for him. And the story he shared was, I mean, one of the most powerful things we heard all weekend. Wow. Like, I was bawling.
Wow. And
it ended up healing a really significant relationship for him in his life. Wow. With a family member, like, that he hadn't talked to in years. It was, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Yeah. I didn't waste 7 minutes talking about fucking intuition, right? For this person to share. It was so important, And so I think I'm looking for, when it's truly a yes, but I'm feeling resistance, like, there is a deeper piece of me that has energy. And this morning's discussion with the spirit guides, they were talking about, like, literally, they were talking about how some challenges energize us and some challenges drain us. And the right challenges for you because they're going to be the ones that energize you. Yep. And that's a very different, that's not the same thing as if it feels good or not. It's still a challenge and there's still resistance, but there's something where it's like, this is good pain. Like, or this is pain that's like giving me energy, even though I don't want to do it. And then there are other challenges that literally drain us. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking about it in terms of relationships. I was listening to a podcast this morning about marriages and relationships, and just like kind of sitting with how I felt about some of the things that were said, and this whole concept of like, should it be hard? Right. And that's kind of where that message came in. I was thinking about different people I've dated in the past, and there are quote challenges, and thinking about, with the right person, those challenges, they're still challenging, but there's an energy to them. There's like there's an energy to them. Yeah. And when I look back on where it was just really not in alignment, like the challenge, it was draining to work through. It was just draining to work through. And it's a really subtle distinction. I also think you have to have the emotional awareness and maturity to be honest about what's really going on. I think that's the other piece. And I think that that's just a process to becoming emotionally mature enough to discern that. I think that's another thing I've been reflecting on in the last couple of days, especially, that I don't have the answer to, of like, because I do think underlying a lot of the quote answers I give people about questions they ask, there's a level of, you have to be emotionally mature enough to discern these things. And I don't know that I've distilled down the process of how to help people become emotionally mature enough. I don't know. A part of me thinks a big piece of it is you have to be around people who are, and almost just learn through example and get those proper reflections. But I just think there are so many people who are trying to do the work, and the people who are giving them reflections are giving them bad reflections, you know? So I don't know. It's hard. I can't always give a clear cut, like, these are the things you do. Even, you know, I had a client a couple days ago, and he just kept being like, what's the process? Like, tell me. And I was like, I can't. And I have this conversation a lot. I'm like, and you know, in a lot of sessions, I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things to do. And most I am. But there are certain things where I'm like, you've got to be on the journey. Like, there are lots of clients like, what book should I read? And a book will pop in. I'll say, this is coming up. But there are other times where I'm like, I can't tell you, because you got to stumble upon the book, right? You got to like live that life path. Or people are like, well, who do I work with? How do I find the person? I'm like, they will be delivered to you. I can't tell you from the people I know. It's got to be whoever you're supposed to work with, who's probably someone I've never met before, I've never heard of. You know, so you have to just be kind of willing to let life deliver you the right people. You know, this morning I was thinking about a hire I want to make, and my logical mind is, okay, how do I find them? Who is it? And my soul is just like, make the request. And I was like, okay, I'm looking for the person who can help me with this, who holds this energy, send me the best person, and that's it. And life will deliver it to me, because I'm ready for it. You know? Yeah.
And you've had enough, like me as well. Like, we've had enough experiences where we just know that to be true and that to work. And it's one thing. I was so funny because I was reflecting on this the other day as well, because I just got set up with a new personal trainer for this next goal that I'm doing, heading up to the Himalayas to climb a mountain. And it was like the perfect, it's like, I couldn't have picked a better person. I literally just signed up with him today to do a package. And it was like, every single time when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Every single time. So grateful. Every single time, it's like that key mentor, that key person, that key hire. It's always like right there when you're ready for it. But you have to just be open to it. You can't shortcut that. It doesn't necessarily come from like, I don't know about you, but I've never ever once had something come from just like applying through an online portal or something like that, right?
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I think with things like that and trusting that process, and then also going back to the, how do I know if it's like real, like what kind of resistance is this? I think that you got to be okay with just understanding you're going to have to experiment. So I had to do a lot of things that were uncomfortable for me, that were out of alignment, to also find the feeling of doing things that were uncomfortable, and then, oh, it was in alignment. And I only knew that hindsight. And then I started to reflect on the differences of how that felt in my body, in my system, with my intuition. And then I started to understand that for myself. And then same thing was just like, you know, trusting the process. I had to let people come into my life who weren't the right fit, but I was building the muscle of letting people come into my life. And then I also find people who were, and then I started to kind of refine that process of who really was in alignment, who wasn't. So I had to be okay with things not working, just for the point of, let me just try all of it that's uncomfortable. Let me try fully letting the universe deliver it. And then I started refining it from there, you know? And there was something that happened recently that we talked about, but basically I had made a decision that didn't work out very well this year. And I was reflecting on how I felt when I originally made that choice. And there was a really strong part of me, like logically, it seemed like a really good choice. And I remember feeling like, I remember this so vividly. I felt where I was, and I just had a full sacral yes. I felt like a full sacral yes of like, yes, put the money in this, like this is going to work out. And I had that excitement and that energy, but I also had this like aftertaste, this like kind of doubt thing that just kept popping in, and I should have listened to that. And so it's interesting how that energy at the time, I don't know that that was my sacral. I think that that was the person who I was talking to, their sacral. So I think the other piece of that was like, you know, how am I really feeling when I'm by myself, you know? And if there's like a deeper undertone, like a deeper aftertaste of like, there's something weird with this, I've got to listen to that. And so for me, I think about it vibrationally, and when I'm tuning into my thoughts and my feelings in my body and my consciousness, there are layers and levels to that. And I'm feeling into, where is this? And there's the top of the iceberg, but I got to get down, like, what's all the way underneath? And it's the bottom layer of the cake that's the truth for me. And so that's something that, whether or not that makes sense to people listening, it's again, it's just like something I can only try and describe it in so many ways, but it's like a deeper undertone. I'm looking for like the deeper feeling, the deeper emotion. And my fear and my conditioning, it does have more of like, you know, it's more of a nervous system feel. It's more of an intellectual feel. It's a lot of mind chatter. When I go deeper into my heart, into my soul, it's like that place where it's both so obvious that you miss it, but so subtle that you miss it at the same time. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I think that's where the truth lies for me.
I like that. I think the theme that I'm picking up there, though, is that like in everything in the process that you were just explaining around that, it was taking awareness of being able to like, let me go meditate with this. Let me go sit with this and see what's there. See what's that bottom layer of the cake. Good analogy. Run with that one. It's a good one. It's that bottom layer of the cake. What's there? What's really there? Let me sit with that. And then also being okay. I think it's a great point. Being okay and giving yourself grace for making not the right decision, because in the grand scope, that probably could still be the right decision. Like, even though this thing didn't work out for you, and like, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I believe that that's going to set the stage for you to make even more doing what you want to do next, or like whatever that's going to lead to. Like, sometimes you have to date the wrong person to like date the right person.
100%. No, and that is the truth, right? It's like, is it ever really the wrong decision? Right. No, because like what you learn from it is just invaluable. So, but you know, in the moment to moment, people are like, is what's correct for me? Yeah. And I think that's the other thing where I don't take it so seriously, because I always know I can't really make the wrong choice, you know? And I think people just take everything a little too seriously.
And I think also people don't make decisions because of that. Yeah. There's a great Robert Kiyosaki quote, which is, even the wrong decision is better than no decision. Yeah. Like,
I totally
be okay with making the wrong decision, because you're still making a decision and you're moving energy. You're closing off energy. You're opening new energy. You're not just like sitting stagnant. I think there's a lot of people that are just sitting stagnant. I can relate to that too from times. It's just like you get in this little paralysis, paralysis, but like make the action. Yeah. I run that way. Yeah. In that way. Same with you. It's like, you're just like,
we do run that way, and people really are stuck. I'm curious what you think, like why so many people don't move at all. Because I feel like a lot of people, especially in the personal development space, again, they're just trying to find the right mindset shifts. I think that will make them move, but they never move. And I'm like, I don't think there's so many people. I'm like, I don't think there's anything anyone could ever tell you that's gonna make you move. Like, something within you has got to do it. So I don't know. I get curious about why people are so wanting to be in that stuckness.
I think it's because the devil we know is more comfortable, is better than the devil that we don't know. Like the fear, the story, or the things. It's like it's comfortable to be like, cool, like I know what I'm working on, or this is what I'm right, and to be kind of comfortable with even the things that you're uncomfortable with. But then there's the expansion moments. Like I've just been going through an expansion moment with my business closing of like something that just rocks your whole world in those ways. Yeah. And you can't avoid those. Like you have to lean into those for sure. But I think it comes back to comfort, I think, right? Yeah. Just that we want to be in our comfort.
Yeah. I mean, I know people are afraid of the unknown. It just makes no sense to me. Yeah. Like it just it's like, I don't know, everything that has happened that my mind could say is bad, I'm like, there's also something so exciting about it. Yeah. Like there's something so exciting about it, because like now you're just in the realm of what could happen next. Yeah. And it's a whole new story. It's a whole new chapter. And like, I don't know. I mean, that's where all the gold is.
That's it. That's when the audiences, Chad and I were talking about this on the podcast last week. This is when the audience is at the edge of their seat. They've just refilled the popcorn. Yes. Like they're like, what's she going to do next?
It's the best fucking part.
It's the best part. It's the part that we pay to go to the movies to see. Yeah. Like, that's the juice. Yeah,
100%.
I just saw Gladiator last night. Have you seen it yet?
No, I want to see it though.
I'll go with you and see it again. Okay. It's so good. Yeah, I need to see it a second time. So good. Okay. And I was thinking about the same time. It's just like, what's he gonna do next?
Yeah.
Like, you're down in the dumps,
Yeah.
you're in the dungeon, like, how's he gonna get out of this one?
Yeah.
But that's like, and we hold on to that perseverance,
Mm-hmm.
that grit, and we have the opportunity to embody that within ourselves. So like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, embody that.
I feel like we have lost stories in our society. I feel like everything has turned into so much information, and people are information overload, and people are desperate for just connection. And so many people have become uninteresting because they don't have life experience.
Yeah.
They just sit behind their desk and work all day, come home, make dinner, fall asleep, like literally.
Right.
And even people, even entrepreneurs, right? It's
Right.
like they're building something really cool, but I'm like, but are you cool? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's cool about you? Like, and even like it'll look like they're living these fancy lives, but there's no real experience in it. It's like, yeah, I went on this trip, went out to dinner, had a surface level conversation. Like, there's a richness to life. Like, people have to be having interesting conversations and doing interesting things, and that's where our stories come from, like in culture and society.
And we want that.
Yeah, and that's like where we learn from.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've really, really, really lost that. Yeah. Like, I have been myself just reading a lot more of like my old favorite books, like OG literature, and I'm like, wow, this is so refreshing. Like, people don't write like this anymore. People don't tell stories like this anymore, and there's like so much that you learn from texts like that you just don't get anymore, and I just don't want us to lose that. I feel like we also have lost that in a lot of conversation, for sure. I mean, not us, because but I'm, but this is how you learn as a person.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I think if you think about humanity and how we've evolved, like, we're in this information age, right? We're still brand new in this information age where we have at our fingertips, we have access to more information than we could possibly consume in 1,000 million billion lifetimes, right? And so that's all new. And so because we're now in this information age, is like, we can get all this information, and so there's this natural of like, ooh, give me the information, ooh, learning, like, ooh, interesting. But knowledge is not power. It's potential power. It's actualized knowledge that becomes power. It's when you can put it into practice that becomes power. And because if knowledge was power, this is what my old mentor Xander would say this all the time. If knowledge was power, then universities would be the most powerful places on the planet, because you have all these people and I think that's a lot wrong too with the education system that people don't like, is because you're just in theory. It's like, things theoretically can look good, but in practice doesn't really work out. Communism, if you look at communism, it looks great on paper, it looks amazing on paper, but in practice hasn't really worked out that well. So I think that there's that disconnect from theory to application, and I think that we're and we need to be shifting back into this information age back into the actualization age, right? How are we actualizing this? How are we putting this into practice? How are we living this? How are we moving this, embodying this into our experience?
100%. I think a lot of that has to do with how we relate to that knowledge, or how we relate to those theories, though. I have been re-listening to one of my favorite podcasts that Kaylin introduced me to.
Oh, yeah? Which one?
It's called Where Is My Mind? Have you listened to it?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, she had introduced me to this. And I think one of her friends had sent it to her. I don't remember, but a while back, and I've listened to this series a couple times. It's so good. It's like it's 8 episodes. It's just a podcast series, and it's a scientific exploration of consciousness.
Cool. And
basically just all of the proof we have that consciousness is not in the brain. And it looks into the science of things like what's happening with near-death experiences, but like the science of telepathy and remote viewing, and like all of that, psychic activity.
Can you send that to me?
I will. It's really great, especially for people who aren't super spiritual. It's all science-based, right? Yeah. And part of it is they're exploring. He's talking to all these like physicists and neuroscientists and like people who have won Nobel Prizes. Like, it's all just very factual. And part of it is an exploration of how a lot of these people who study these concepts and who are finding a lot of evidence, like, hey, this is pretty much proving consciousness is not in the brain, how they are shut out of educational institutions, how they like lose their jobs, they lose tenure, they're made out to be quacks, they're shut out, and people will get very upset because they'll say, well, if this is correct, then everything that we have learned is wrong. Right. And it's just too big a paradigm to shift at this point. I think it will shift, and it has, but we have to remember, and they talk about this in the podcast, so many things that we think that are just obvious now, people were like killing people over thinking. Yeah. I mean, the idea that Earth wasn't the center of the galaxy was crazy, right? Like, we thought everything revolved around Earth, or like the idea of germ theory. Like, people thought it was completely insane that bacteria and viruses could cause. Yeah, it's and the fact that people aren't understanding this brain and consciousness thing, the fact that people just scientifically aren't believing in telepathy, or remote viewing, it doesn't make sense. Like when you actually look at the science and the science of the brain. And so I just think it's so like wild, you know? And so that's why I'm just saying it depends how we relate to that knowledge and that information. Because I mean, I even think about, you know, one of my majors in college was psychology, and like what we learn about the science of depression and anxiety. I mean, that's all theory. It's not actually neurotransmitter deficiency. Like that's all a theory that's never been proven. And the things that have been proven are actually more that it's inflammation of the brain. Right. And so you have all these people who are talking about this on podcasts, everybody who's independent, right? All these scientists and doctors have to go independent routes because anything that's mainstream, no one's going to listen. You have to change every textbook. Totally. Right. And I remember it was interesting. I mean, when we were in college, for example, that was when we were really starting to get into this era of there's a lot of information. Like it was like podcasts were new. I mean, that's why I started podcasts. And I was like, holy shit, there are really smart people here saying these things and talking about topics that I'm learning about in class, but I'm learning from textbooks that are 15, 20 years old, even 10 years old, even 5 years old. But by the time it gets into a textbook, you know, when was that started? And I would be listening to people who are talking about up-to-date things, and it was literally complete opposite of what I was learning in class. Because I would listen to a lot of things on psychology and obviously related to health and wellness. And I was like, okay, I have to memorize all this shit for my test, and also holds the fact that it's literally wrong. It's literally like all these facts are wrong. So let me just release after, right? So I would study in a way where it wouldn't be permanent retention.
That's good.
I would just binge it the night before and lose it the next day. But it's wild with, you know, now we have all this information. You got to figure out what's true, what's not. But there's a lot of, I don't know, we got to think about how we're relating to knowledge and our willingness to be wrong or to learn new things. And I think that's, I don't know, I feel like we're in this war right now. There's a lot of like, it's like war energy for people with what they're sharing. Everybody's fighting against each other. Like how you make good content for a lot of people, like they'll teach you this, like find something you disagree with and just be like, that's wrong because XYZ. And it's just a lot of conflicting information. Now people are more confused. No one's actually learning anything. People are just overwhelmed, and then they don't even want to learn anymore.
Right.
So I don't know how we get out of that untangled. Actually, I do.
How?
Well, I don't know if you saw well, you actually didn't because you don't have Instagram right now. But I went off about how people don't know how to critically think anymore. This was around the election time, and I'm just watching what people are saying. It's not about whose side you're on. Right. It's both sides. I'm like, just the way that people communicate, the way they discuss, it's just riddled with fallacies. And I think one of the most important parts of my education was like learning about, like within philosophy, how you craft a sound argument. There are rules to this. There are rules to critically thinking. Like there are logical rules of how this must go, and no one has this anymore. And those same rules that you learn in philosophy about how to craft a sound and valid argument are the same lessons I think you need to know to be able to critically think. Because I think that training for me, I can listen to someone, I'm like, that doesn't track. That literally doesn't work. And I mean, I remember, shout out to freaking, Mr. Turkis in sophomore year of high school, who would make us learn these things, and we would have to craft an argument, and it was like, this leads to this, leads to this. We'd have to write this whole thing out, and he would just slash it. Once you hit one thing that wasn't valid, slash. Wow. You have to restart. And that trains you to really think differently. So it's how we communicate with people, but how we listen. And people don't know how to be critical listeners. And if you can't be a critical listener, you can't be a critical thinker.
That's it right there. That's it right there. Yeah, because critical thinking means being open to not agreeing and being okay with that. Like that's also part of what I think has made this country so great in particular, is that it's okay. Like we don't have to agree. Like we don't have to agree on anything, but like we have to be able to have a conversation about it and to be able to I want to hear you out. And especially I think that I live my life in this way. I know you do as well, and as a curious, open-minded person who is a student of life, like I want to learn. Like I am genuinely curious. Like, why do you think that? Or like, why do you think this policy is good? Or just anything in life. Like, oh, that's something different. You're in a different kind of relationship. Like, why? Tell me about that. So there's this intellectual curiosity too that I think is disincentivized by mainstream thinking and mind control thinking. Because if you want to control a narrative or you want to control the way people think, like intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness are anti that and counter that and are dangerous to the status quo of the system.
100%. That curiosity is so key, but to be curious, you have to be emotionally regulated.
Yeah, this is true. This is very true.
The reason why people can't sit around and discuss, I mean, think about this. You know, back in the day, you had to be able to sit around at a table with people and discuss things that you disagreed with and be mature about it. Nowadays, you can sit behind a keyboard and throw a fit and cut off your eyebrows, you know, and throw a temper tantrum as a grown-ass adult. You're not in that situations anymore. And I was listening to the Skinny Confidential podcast, and they were like, you know, people need to learn that you might get punched in the face. Like we've lost that art. And I mean, I agree with that. It's like you gotta be able to have mature arguments and discussions and be okay with people disagreeing with you. And people are not emotionally regulated, and if somebody says something that they disagree with, they're not even listening.
Yeah, it's true.
They're not even listening. I'm getting triggered by something because my whole worldview might fall apart because, you know, whatever associations I've created with that, all these other stories I'm creating in my head, I'm so dysregulated that I'm just freak out. And then I project all this stuff onto you, and I make all these assumptions. I can't manage myself. And you've really got to look at, I don't give a fuck what your belief is. If somebody disagreeing with you, even if they're just fucking insane, like really emotionally dysregulates you, you need to look at that. Because it's one thing if you're like, yeah, I disagree, I think that's insane. It's another if it's like, how could you think that? Like, oh my gosh, that is where you're giving your power away. If your sense of self and okayness depends on everybody else agreeing with you and depends on the people around you not being crazy, like you're fucked. Sorry.
100%.
And that's the thing that's happened is everybody wants everybody else to manage themselves for them to be okay.
That's right.
People do need to learn to manage themselves. But I cannot wait around for the masses to manage themselves and regulate themselves and become emotionally mature and intelligent for me to feel regulated within myself. Absolutely. I cannot.
No. There's two ways to live life. One as is a conditional liver, living conditionally. I'll be happy if this, if that, if then happiness, right? Or like I can only be okay if everything else around me is okay, right? Or you can live as an unconditional thriver, and you can work to cultivate and practice to cultivate that self-resilience and that feeling of okayness within yourself regardless of what's going on around. And I think generally if like you pose that to people, it's like, okay, those are pretty two distinct ways to live your life. Like which would you rather be?
100%. Well, and it just energetically, right? That's like, where is my sense of groundedness sourced from? Where is my sense of self-worth sourced from? That's all the spiritual work that we've talked about, right? It's like my connection with source and the divine. Like when that's solid, things don't throw us off the way they throw other people off. And that's something that's been interesting for me to navigate, because I've had people tell me like, you know, you're not feeling your emotions around this, you're just bypassing it. I'm like, no, I just actually know it's going to be fine. That's like how connected I am. Genuinely. I know. And I know a lot of people do bypass, but I'm just telling you, no, I genuinely like we're good. We're chilling. And like I'm genuinely just grounded within myself. It's so funny. And it's like that's fucking power. Like that's where you are unshakable. You know, I was like, what you've been going through, same thing.
That's it. Yeah. Like, it's so funny because like I've had people as the business is closed, like people are, and granted, like I've been able to move through it a step or two ahead of people finding out or learning, and they have their own perceptions and stories and projections. And but like I'm like, people are like, oh my God, how are you doing? And I'm like I'm actually okay. Like it's been tough for sure, but like especially right now, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like I'm actually genuinely okay. Like no, it's okay. You can be vulnerable around me. Like you're just bypassing. It's like no, like genuinely like I feel like I'm and that's also because I have people like yourself that would call me out on that for real.
I would.
You know what I mean? And you do it oftentimes, just like not for real.
Right.
But no, that's that's a deeply spiritual practice as well, of learning to become a resilient, unconditional thriver.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way that you frame that. I never really thought of it that way. Like, but I just think that life is always changing. Like, we're always changing, and you're always going to have things that could be challenges. So they could be an obstacle, or they can be an opportunity.
There you go.
And so it's just always going to be that way. And I did an episode on like how I healed my depression. And a big thing for me was like, I just had this moment with myself where I was like, there's always going to be stuff in my life like that I don't like. Like, there just always is.
Yeah.
And I had to really just realize that. And I was like, how am I going to relate to it? Like, I can always let this frustrate me and always let this bother me. Or I find another way to view the world, a way that feels better. And when that clicked for me, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to choose that because I'm always going to come up against things that are uncomfortable. I'm always going to come up against things that don't feel great, you know? And then when I chose that other way of viewing the world and moving through the world, I also simultaneously stopped attracting a lot of those things too, right? But it's like, the reality is, I mean, I was talking to somebody about parenting the other day. It's like, yeah, like, this shit's gonna be hard. Like, you know, I go change diaper, I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like, you know, and I've talked to some of my friends. This diaper thing has come up in the last week because I've been around a lot of babies. Yeah. And it's like, you know, my sister, like my friends are like, you know, when it's your kid's poop, you're fine. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. It's like little things like that. Like, there's always going to be things that come with what you want to do, or with entrepreneurship, right? I have this, I don't know what juice people are drinking, like, related to starting their own business, where I'm like, I don't know what reality you're living in where you think there's not going to be a single thing that you don't like. You know, people are like, so it's got to be in alignment. And this is why all these spiritual people don't make any money, because everything has to be in alignment. And they think alignment is they're never uncomfortable. Right. I'm like, no, to have the business that I like, the life that I love, to be as fortunate as I am, there's all kinds of shit I do all day that I don't like. But it doesn't matter, because that comes with all the shit that's so amazing, you know? So if you're looking for not a single thing to be uncomfortable for you, like, tough shit. You know, do I want to do my taxes? No. Am I going to manifest my way out of it? No. You know, like, it is what it is.
It is. And life and business become a lot easier when you're willing to do the hard things. Yeah. And you have to face it, and you have to move through it. I think business is a great reflection of that as well.
Do you think, though, that you're like that naturally, or do you think that you're like that because you were forced to deal with hard shit early on?
The latter. I think being forced to deal with hard shit. And this is also, like, I think about sports for me were a huge, and I know for a lot of people as well, but sports were a huge way, in football in particular, because football has this physicality to it as well. That's like, that stokes this primal kind of feeling of being a gladiator in the Coliseum, or being in battle. And it stokes that deeper primal thing. But, like, you're literally taught, like, how are you going to respond when you get knocked on your ass? Like, when you get hit on the chin and you get knocked down, how are you going to persevere through that? Or when you lose a game, or when you're down, how are you going to get up, and how are you going to respond? So it starts to teach you this sense of responsibility of how am I, what is my ability to respond? Yeah. And you build that as a muscle, right? So, and then football, and then injuries, and my physical health, those were all, I was just like, all right, here's another piece of adversity. Am I going to let this define me? Or am I use this opportunity to find myself, right? And just practicing that, as my uncle says, the comeback is greater than the setback, and believing that, and having enough experiences and lived experience to, like, face that and go through to where it's like, oh, actually, what if the growth that I'm asking for and the gold that I'm seeking for isn't going to just show up on a gold platter at my door? What if it's actually going to be covered in the shit? Like, what if it's going to come covered in this pile of shit that I have to, like, sit with and hose down, to run with our shit analogy here. Like, you know,
love that.
Love it. But and I found that to be true more times than not. I mean, all the time I found that to be true. And so that just extrapolated, and then the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So I just took that to business, and it's the same shit. Literally.
Yeah. I feel like that speaks to, I know, and we've talked about this, but, like, everyone keeps saying it's divine feminine issue. I'm like, no, we have a divine masculine issue.
I agree.
Within everyone.
Yep.
Like, that is the real deficiency. That's the biggest hole we have, is that divine
in
masculine.
Men and in women.
In everybody.
Yeah.
In everybody. And I think a big part of that is commitment energy, right? It's like, because when you're fully committed to something, like in your divine masculine, committed to it, when something comes up, you don't run the fuck away. No. Right? Like, you figure it out.
Yeah.
You figure it out. And I mean, I think that's why any long-term relationship is going to teach you the most. It's going to grow you the most, whether it's a long-term romantic relationship or long-term friendships with like the right friends who do challenge you and reflect things back to you, or a business. Like a business is a long-term relationship where like that shines a light on your shit, or like for me, the podcast, like I always say, this is the longest relationship I've ever had.
Yeah.
Right. And it probably will be in my whole life. Like if I continue this for a long time, it will be longer than my marriage. Like that's crazy. But like the podcast has pushed me in so many ways, like, and triggered me in so many ways, and in many, like, I've had to do a lot of healing my relationship with this thing. Like, in 10 years you bump up against stuff, right? Like, it's just like a romantic relationship. It's like, if you don't keep it spicy, things get stale. Like, you want to walk away. Like, you have to put it's about my relationship with the actual thing.
Amazing.
And that's why, like, again, when people have this idea, everything I do is fun.
Right.
And a lot of what I do is fun. It's so fun to just sit here and have these conversations with people that I love. And like this, and like the fact that this is like work is amazing. And at the same time, there's so much else that goes into this whole dynamic that pushes me and challenges me in a lot of ways. And like just the longevity of that relationship and the personalities that you deal with and what it calls up within me and certain conversations that, where things unravel, and just the commitment alone of it, of showing up, at least once a week. For a long time it was 2 times a week. The vulnerability, the things that people say, like there's so many other dynamics that really push you. And there's so many times I was like, it's always been a conversation of like, do we end this? Like that has always been on the table, and there's been a lot of times I really thought about it, and I've had to look at, am I just attached to it because it's been so long? I don't want to shut it down. Is this just I need to change my relationship with it? Like, again, for me, it really feels it's like a romantic relationship where I'm like, do we break up, or do we just need to like work on this? Like, it's been so really helpful for me. And I really do feel like I've learned a lot about like long-term relationships through my podcast.
That makes total sense. Okay, we're going to double tap on this long-term relationship, because like we're celebrating, and I feel so honored to be here for the 700th episode.
I know, it's crazy.
It's insane. It really is an honor when you asked me, and when you asked me to come on for this episode, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever.
There's no one else I'd rather do it with.
I appreciate
and I was
that.
like, I have to do it with someone who I'll always be friends with.
Yes. I love it. No one you're gonna break up with, or no one that's gonna fall out of your life.
I'm not gonna break up with Josh.
This is amazing. I love that. Thank you. So 700, 10 years. 700 dates you've had with yourself and other people on this podcast. That's a lot of reps.
It's a lot of reps.
And as someone I'm approaching my 200th episode on my podcast, I've felt it's so aptly put. It's so true of the relationships and the seasons and the ways that your relationship changes with that. But I'm so curious, like, about this process for you of 700 episodes. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I know that after 5 episodes, 50% of podcasts out there don't have more than 3 episodes. I think is the stat.
It's wild.
It's
like,
insane.
I mean, if you are consistent and you just put out an episode every week for like, I don't even know how long it is. It's not even that long. Like, you'll be in the top 1% of podcasts.
Yeah.
That's how many people quit.
Right. It's after like 10 episodes or something like that. It just happens naturally. Like, you're just a top 1% podcast. And what I'm curious is, like, where did, like, because I don't know this, but like, where did this podcast start? Like, like where did the podcast
on the floor of my college apartment?
Floor of your college apartment, and you're learning and you're listening to other podcasts. You're inspired, and you're like, cool, I want to start my own podcast. And was it focused on food blogging? Was it health and wellness? Like, was it sharing your story? Were you doing interviews? Like, where did this energy start with your podcast?
So it started. So I was getting really into podcasts. I love podcasts. I feel like podcasts are my best college education. And specifically, I was listening to a lot of nutrition related podcasts because at the time, I was at UCLA, and I knew that as soon as I graduated, I wanted to go to nutrition school. So I was like basically just getting my education before then. And I really learned more on podcasts than anything. So just straight educational information. I was like, holy shit, this is insane. And like, there were like maybe like 10 good podcasts around health. Like, it was just 10 to pick from. It was like Ben Greenfield, Balanced Bites, like, what were they? People have changed their name by now, but these classics. And I was just like soaking it up. But And then I started exploring other podcast topics, and there just wasn't that much out there. And there was nothing for the person who I was, where I was 19. And everybody who's podcasting was like 35, 40, 45. And everything, most of it was very educational. You know, there were definitely some things, I think like Betches was going on. There were some things that were a little lighter, but it just wasn't big, you know, and everything. I started listening to some of the more pop culture-y or like lifestyle podcasts. And again, it was like very geared toward people in their 30s. And I was just dealing with such a different time in my life, you know, I wasn't even fully an adult yet. So my friends and I, we had this tradition where we'd always go find gluten-free, dairy-free dessert in LA, like the best one. We'd like find new restaurants, and then we'd just get on a sugar high and we'd stay up like super late and just have these crazy deep conversations. And one night I was like, we need to record these. Yeah. Like other people our age would love to listen to this. So that's how it started. So I grabbed 2 of my roommates, pulled them into it, and we started as 3 of us. Wow. And we were just talking about like life stuff and things that we were dealing with at our age. We're talking about dating and like health things, but like friendships, just college shit. It was about like college life basically. What was
the name of the podcast then?
It's called Actually Adultish.
Actually Adultish. Yeah. I love it.
Actually Adultish. And yeah, it was just a fun thing. And then, you know, I was getting a little bit older, dynamics were changing. I was getting a lot more into health and wellness. A lot of the health and wellness conversations were bleeding into that. We were all super healthy. And I was also, you know, I like had a platform, and I was also thinking, you know, this could also be kind of part of my business. So it just kind of started merging more into the wellness direction. And I was, you know, the ringleader of it, just dragging everybody else along. And it just kind of started morphing into me leading interviews in the health and wellness space. And being in LA, everybody was around, you know, so, or people were traveling in. So I'd reach out to people, and it was a lot, I think, easier to get people on your show back then, you know? So really quickly I got really big names on my show, and everybody's like, who's this little blonde girl? Like everyone got a kick out of me because I mean, my age was a huge advantage, and my personality, you know, I'm this like, at the time I have, you know, this like platinum blonde bob. I'm 19 years old. I'm just like, you know how I am. And I'm interviewing, you know, like 40-year-old men, and they're like, who is this girl? You know, and it really worked to my advantage, and everybody just, I think, was enamored by me and took me under their wing. And I also was definitely manifesting that. Like in my life, I've always liked to attract in people who are older and wiser than me, who represent like older brother, older sister, mom, dad energy. Like I really like having that kind of mentorship. So a lot of those people became, I mean, to this day, like lifelong friends and like mentors for me. A lot of those people just in my journey with my business, with my health, with relationships over the last 10 years have been the people like I've leaned on, that I've called up like it was my own mom or my own dad. Like, you know what I mean? So I've had a lot of incredible people come into my life who could really support me in that way through podcasting. And so I made a lot of really great genuine connections, and I loved podcasting because it took all the looks out of it. So that's part of my ish with kind of how it's gone now. But it was just, can you actually hold an interesting conversation for an hour? And everybody I met through podcasting at the time was like, these were real deal people. It felt like a natural filter of anybody who's a podcast host. Know they're cool. You know, they're down to earth. You know, they're smart. And so I just met some of the most incredible people through it. And I obviously made a lot of connections through it. And that gave me an advantage just in my life and business, because I was around a lot of really successful people, and they would tell me the cheat sheet. They'd be like, Christina, you gotta do this. Like, Christina, you gotta do that. Like, and I wouldn't have learned that from anyone else, you know. It wasn't stuff I had to pay for. And it was just really important on so many levels for me. So it just rolled into health and wellness. I changed the name. My podcast was called Wellness Realness for like the longest time. And it grew really fast. You know, it was like a top 50 podcast by the time I was, you know, 21. Amazing. And just an incredible community of people, so much fun. And then, like, long story short, you know, eventually I started getting way more into spirituality and business, and I was talking a lot more about that. I changed to Christina the channel.
When was that changed to Christina the channel?
I was 25, so 4 years ago.
Okay. Somewhere around like episode, where are we at? Like in the couple hundreds, like 200, 300,
maybe
400?
400?
Yeah. Okay.
Probably around there.
Sweet.
I have no idea, but it sounds about right.
Sounds right. Checks out.
That was the era where I was doing 2 a week for a long time. For like a couple of years, I was doing 2 a week. And yeah, and then we changed it to multidimensional like this year. So in last year, I think.
Amazing.
Right, Taylor? Yeah. Yeah, I think it was recent. So yeah, new era.
New era. I love it. Okay, I need to pause and go to the bathroom real quick because I have a small bladder.
Okay,
and I've been drinking all the liquids.
We're almost done though.
Are we almost done?
Well, it's an hour.
Where are we at right now?
An hour.
Oh, we're an hour right now?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pause because we need to wrap this presently.
Okay.
I don't know how long we're going for. Oops. I'm like, I need to pee really badly, so we're going to pause this.
Okay. Hey, you ready?
Ready.
Josh,
we're already at time?
this is my first pee break in 700 episodes.
Seriously?
No one has ever done that.
No one's
before.
ever taken a pee break? In 700 episodes, this is a first. No one's ever paused to take a pee break.
No one has ever done that.
I'm glad I could be a first. That's so funny.
Making history.
Making it
Very on
I don't know how
brand.
long we're going for. We could be going for.
No.
Okay, cool.
We got 15 minutes left.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm just getting to the good questions now about your relationship.
Okay, well, it can be a little longer if
Okay,
you want.
that's okay. That's okay. So, okay. Let me take us right back into there. That's awesome. So, this relationship that you had, this is a long-standing relationship.
Yeah.
So, what are you
This is why I don't have commitment issues.
This is why you don't have commitment issues, yes. Because you've had a podcast
Yeah.
for 10 years. So, like,
It's healed me.
where are you at with your relationship now with this? And what are you
Mhm.
looking forward to that's unfolding with this relationship?
I feel good about my relationship with it.
Good.
I feel like I'm still kind of visioning for next year of where I want to take it. We're, coming back to in person was really important
Mhm.
because the whole beginning was all in person. That's what I
Right.
loved about it. And then when COVID hit, everything turned virtual and I just kind of stuck with that. And then I was also doing a lot of just solo episodes just because of how the podcast had changed. And I felt like, and I don't know if this is just a limiting belief or an issue on my end, which might have been, I was just getting bored with guests. No shade to anybody, but I was like, people are not saying anything new.
Mm.
And after 500 interviews, you're like, especially, I don't know, I just felt like everybody was saying the same thing and I was bored. At the beginning, people were saying really different things. And so I just started doing solos because it was more entertaining for me. I think I needed a reset. That time I really needed to reconfigure my relationship with it, but I did realize that I just lost a lot of zest for it, which is why I told the team, I was like, I have to get back in person. I know this is going to be a large inconvenience because this isn't the central point of my business. Like in many ways it is, I guess, forward facing, but a lot of people, their podcast is their business. And I podcast with the same frequency as most people where like that's the one thing they're doing, but it's not the one thing I'm doing. Like my main, where I make my income is like everywhere else.
Totally.
So, obviously it just adds a lot more to this to be this consistent and, but I was like, I want to be back in person. And if we're going to go back in person, we should have video, obviously, and turn it more into a show. And I wanted to just change the frequency of the conversation. I think a big thing that started to happen, and this is part of, who I choose to have on the podcast, is really important because a lot of people are bringing this very weird energy to interviews now where it's just so dry. It's so just like question answer. It's not a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to work for me, And so there's been a lot of people who want to come on the show and I'm like, no, because I'm not doing that.
I'm not interviewing.
Yeah,
I want to have a conversation.
I want to have a conversation. And I think because podcasting has gotten so much bigger and more people are going on shows and hosting shows, that's become a lot more normalized. I mean, I've listened to a lot of random podcasts and I'm like, wow, this sucks because it's so interviewy.
Yep. And
it's just not enjoyable for me personally.
For sure.
If I'm listening to something because I just want to learn, it's very educational, then I don't mind that at all. But even someone like Huberman, right? That's so much education. And it's not this dry ass interview. Yeah. Like there's still conversation to it. So it's more engaging. It's a different way to learn. But yeah, I've always had to, throughout the last decade, find ways to spice it up. And if I'm not excited about it, then I'm not going to do it. And so I've had to figure out what's exciting for me. So there was the period where what was exciting for me was not talking to anybody else. And I just wanted to get on my soapbox and say my thing, whatever it was. And then I realized I just miss that in-person connection. I miss interesting conversations. I would actually much rather just like chat with my friends than bring people on for more education. I think culturally a lot of people are like that's what they're interested in anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I always think about what are my behaviors in terms of consumption,
Mhm.
and typically my audience is the same as me.
Yep.
And my behaviors are, I'm not trying to flood my brain with like just more education the way I
Yeah.
used to. I just want to, I'm definitely learning things, but it's just more through an interesting conversation. Like I'm
Yeah.
actually a lot more interested in hearing people's like life stories, and I
Mhm.
like that kind of vibe. So
Yeah, you're gonna be a fly on the wall of an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. I feel like you're a part of it.
100%. So yeah,
That makes sense.
I don't even remember what your original question
Yeah,
was.
I think I think Joe Rogan did a good job of popularizing that style. Like
Yeah.
when he sits down for 3 hours
Yeah.
long, and like you have to be genuinely interested in having a real conversation, because
Mhm.
you can't like do an interview for that long. It's not
100%.
question answer. It's
Yeah.
it's conversational.
Yeah.
So.
And not everybody can handle being interviewed by him for that
Correct.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
not to not to at anyone, but
anyone.
I'm adding getting my telepathic message about who
That's-
couldn't handle
That's amazing.
Joe Rogan.
I love it. I love it. So this is really exciting. 700.
I think that it's one of those things, like what I was saying with the book, of like I need to learn how to better kind of integrate what I've accomplished in my life.
Yeah.
Like, to me, intellectually, I'm like, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know that in my body, I'm like really appreciating what that's required of me or who I've become through it.
Yeah.
But if you were telling me that, I'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
epic, you
Totally.
know? So I think I need to do better at like seeing that within myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so much part of my life. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think twice about it, you know? It's
And-
it's like the parent who doesn't pat themselves on the back for getting up and making their kids lunch every day. You're like, that's just
Right.
what I do.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's a whole thing that a
Yeah.
lot of people are too lazy to do,
Right.
you know? So for me, I've been doing this. It's like working out, right? It's just like, you just go to the gym, like you just work out, you don't think about it. And at first it was like a big thing, and then it just becomes part of your life.
Yeah.
And so for this
Yeah.
10 years of it, it's just in my schedule.
Yeah, yeah. And because you're not doing it for like,
Yeah.
to reach 700 episodes or to reach 1,000. You're not doing
Yeah.
it for that goal. It's a byproduct. But
Yeah.
I think it is important
Yeah.
to, I mean, especially knowing you as well, like and for any high achievers or
Mhm.
type A go-getters, like to stop and enjoy the checkpoints
Yeah.
along the way and be like, yeah, like, all right, 700.
You've got to love the process, you know, and I talk to so many podcasters or people who want a podcast, and a lot of people, you know, don't make it. A lot do make it pretty far, but they're unhinged because they're just in it for money and numbers and business. And I honestly think my superpower is that I never did this as part of my business. Like, it started off just like genuinely. It wasn't until way later I realized, oh, this could like be part of my business, but it's still not even as big a part as it could be.
Right.
And I think maybe that's been part of my hesitation of making it. Like, that might be my own block or my own resistance. Like, that's definitely been a conversation on the table, like making this more of like what I'm doing primarily. I don't know, but I think part of me wonders if like, would the joy come out of it for me if it felt like, you know, this is like my income.
Yeah.
You know, all the, like, would that put more pressure? That wouldn't make it fun. I mean, maybe not. But yeah, I've got to like the process, or I wouldn't show up to it. I've got to look forward to it. It's got to be fun for me.
Yeah. And is it fun for you right now?
Yeah, it's super fun for me.
Good.
I mean, isn't this the best?
Best.
We sit around and make lattes. We gossip.
That's it.
I mean, this is it.
Take occasional pee breaks.
Yeah, this is the life.
This is
So no, it's good. And I think it's a nice creative outlet for sure. But I also think, you know, for me, like the relationships are the most important part of this. And so the podcast has been the best place for me to build those really deep relationships. There's no other platform that can really hold space for that in the way this has. I mean, the people who have listened to this regularly, they know me better than my own family.
Right.
I mean, they've heard the insides and outs of my life, you know, and very embarrassing things, very vulnerable things for the past decade, and really have watched me grow up and like continue to grow up and been with me through every relationship and every iteration. That's a real relationship. You know, I don't take that for granted. Like, and I feel that, and that's what's so powerful. You know, it's like, there's not that much that pisses me off or like really triggers me. It's like, if people try to fuck with like my trust with my audience, like, I will come at you. And that's part of, some of that stuff that happened this year, I was like, I'm like a mama bear.
Yeah, I was
like,
to say, let's give mama bear energy.
Absolutely not. I was like, I have spent 10 years in an intimate relationship with everybody who's here, everybody who like spends 2 hours of their week listening to me. I'm like, I don't take that shit for granted.
Right.
I'm like, you're not gonna fucking come in here, you know what I mean? Like that's not gonna work. So even things with sponsors, it's like there's not a sponsor on the show that I don't promote things that I don't like I don't genuinely use or like bleed. Yeah. Like literally bleeding element.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a really important relationship, I think, for me. And I think one of my challenges, like in a good way, that I'm excited about, something I want to vision on for next year, is just like, what else do I want to add in here? How else can I be creative with it? Like, it really is a fun playground for me where there isn't actually any pressure. Yeah. So that's what's really fun, Exciting. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's just the relationships all around with the audience, with the guests, has been just foundational to who I am. I don't know who I would be without that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, on the 700th episode, can we make a commitment that I come back on for your 1,000th?
Yes.
Okay,
Whoa.
cool. How about that?
Whoa, bold ask.
Bold ask. I'm asking. I'm shooting my shot.
Okay, yeah, we can do it.
I would settle for 1,001. Like, like the cherry on top.
1,000 is gonna be. I mean, when will that be?
Be a party. I mean, if you do.
Oh, we have to do a party.
We'll do a party. Yeah. I mean, if you do 1 to 2 a week, if you just do 2 a week, it's 100 a year. So another 3 years, which is not that long.
3
so
years.
2.5 to 3 years. That's nothing.
Yeah, 3 years is like 3 eye blinks.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited. What we'll do is we'll listen back to this one to like where we're at right now, and then it'll be fun before we do the number 1,000.
I think the last. I don't know what I did for 600. I know I did something special for 500 because it was like. Yeah. But. Yeah, who knows? Who knows where I'll be living? Who knows what color my hair will be? Who knows what my job will be? Who knows if, it'll be me or a spirit, and no one knows. So we'll find out.
Well, as your friend, as a fellow podcaster, I'm deeply inspired by the way that you've shown up with consistency from the beginning for 10 years. Doing anything for 10 years is not an easy task, and I think that your audience knows that and appreciates that, and I just want to reiterate that and hope that you hear that. Well done. Yeah, well done. And I'm genuinely excited for this next chapter in the evolutions, and I think it says a lot about you of how you've grown with the podcast and not and used it as a parallel relationship to grow with it, and not ever felt like you've outgrown it, stopped it, even though it might have felt like that at times or you wanted to. But how you've grown with it, and even in the short time that we've known each other, short/long time, I don't even know that we've known each other, seeing how the difference in how you're showing up and how it's just constantly up leveled. But I'm inspired by that, inspired by the way you keep raising the bar. So
thank you.
Well done. Really well done.
I appreciate that. And I hope that for people who have been with it through the evolutions, it gives people permission to change. Yeah. Right? Because it would have been really easy for me to say I'm changing and this isn't working for me anymore, or for me to not let myself change because of an image I wanted to keep up, and I don't let myself do that, you know? So I think it's been really powerful to just let people see me in the raw transformation and different iterations of myself. And like, I mean, I came out, like coming out of the closet as spiritual and coming out of the closet as a psychic, like, all those different things. I think it's good for people to see people go through the journey and know that like in your life you don't need to keep all that inside. You can let people in on that. Like if I can let like strangers on the internet in on it, right, and just let things move with me, like you can change too, and trust that the people in your life who love you are also going to be part of that evolution if they're meant to be there. The same way anyone who is meant to be in this podcast community has stayed with me through all of the shifts and changes. So I think that's the most fun of it, right? Just in it for the plot twist.
That's all we're here for.
We're all here for the plot twist.
That's it. Well, this is amazing. Anything else you want to share as we wrap up here?
Well, thank you for being here with me today. It means a lot to me. Absolute thank you to Ty Nelly. Take a bow, Ty Nelly.
Always.
But no, I mean, I'm super grateful for everybody who has entered my life because of this. Like the listeners, the guests, like the team, and I just have so much like gratitude for this container. I feel like it's like a boat that has carried me through, and different people have hopped on at different times. So I'm just really grateful to everybody like who's listening, who has listened, and I don't take that relationship for granted. I really appreciated it. And it's given me a lot of like the community piece of it has given me so much like strength through my own changes. So I'm just really grateful for everyone, and I just feel so blessed that I get to do this, and you know, we get to be here and do it in this capacity, and that we live in a time where we can share our thoughts and ideas for free and reach so many people, and it's so accessible. So I'm just really grateful for that. But
it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This boat is a super yacht.
It's a
glammed out super yacht.
Yes, it's bedazzled.
It's bedazzled as fuck.
There are spirits on it.
Oh yeah, it's a party going on.
It's gluten-free, dairy-free.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's epic.
Amazing. Well done.
Thank you.
Excited for what's to come.
Me too.